It's our pleasure to welcome you to Beyond Boundaries, a series of virtual sessions initiated by Takshila Educational Society to propagate diverse themes, thoughts, and perspectives. In order to facilitate better understanding of our world and its concerns, we bring articulate speakers from all walks of life on this platform to further ideas that foster learning, self expression, and ingenuity. In this session titled Hidden Secrets, Ancient Mysteries, A Quest for the Truth, our speaker, Christopher Doyle, takes you on a trip deep into ancient history, exploring mysteries from around the world as he reveals secrets of the past. Christopher Doyle is a best-selling author, passionate musician, and proficient corporate executive. His books, the Mahabharata Secret, the Mahabharata Quest series, and the Patala Prophecy series transport the reader into a fascinating world where ancient legends blend with science and history to create a gripping story. A graduate in economics from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and postgraduate in business management from IIM Calcutta, Christopher has worked with leading multinational organizations, published articles on business and management, coached CEOs, and continues to create music through his classic rock band called 33 One Third. Buckaroo, a children's literature festival set up by the public charitable NGO Buckaroo Trust, endeavors to make books come alive through interactions between children and creators of books and storytellers. The festival that focuses on reading for pleasure began in 2008, has since traveled to 16 cities and has completed 37 editions. This session is an effort of the Buckaroo Lit House, an online space created to carry on the mission of bringing children and books together now at home. Today, the speaker will converse for 30 minutes on the topic. You may submit your questions to the chat box of our YouTube channel. All questions from the viewers will be answered collectively by the speaker in the last 15 minutes of the session. Welcome, Christopher. Over to you now.
Thank you, Swati, and it's great to be here with Buckaroo and Takshila Society, and thank you for inviting me for the session. So, for all of you who are watching me right now, if you like secrets and if you like mysteries, I used to love mysteries when I was when I was studying in school. I still do in many ways, and that's why I write the kind of stuff that I write. But if you like mysteries and you like secrets, I'm going to give you half an hour packed with some things which I'm sure you would not have heard of before, but they are some of the most amazing mysteries of the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some images, some photographs, which I've taken, which other people have taken, and I'm going to walk you through a lot of these mysteries. So I'm going to take you deep into the past, beyond history, thousands of years ago, and we're going to be talking about unexplained mysteries. So let's start. Now, when I was reading the Mahabharata, a lot of questions used to come up in my mind, and for those of you who have read the stories of the Mahabharata, maybe you had these questions also. So, did the events that are described in the Mahabharata, did these events actually happen? Is it possible that the weapons we read about, these celestial weapons, did they actually exist? How could people living thousands of years ago have had such an advanced level of science and technology? Are there scientific explanations for many of the amazing things that we read about in the Mahabharata? And were there really giants in the Mahabharata? We read about these enormous beings, the Rakshasas and other huge people who looked like us but were real giants. So I'm going to explore some of these, and a lot of this is what I explore in my books in the Mahabharata Quest series, which is thrillers set in today's times, which looks at science, history, and the Mahabharata. And the other series which I've written is the Patala Prophecy series, which are fantasy thrillers set in modern times, which follows the adventures of two 15-year-old school children who discover a hidden world of swords and mantras. And today I'm going to be presenting you with a lot of facts. Though I write fiction, I write novels, stories, but I'm going to be giving you a lot of facts. So let me start with a mystery from the 19th century. France, February 1868. A man enters a room, one of the rooms which he's looking after. This is the landlord who enters the rooms of one of his tenants. And he finds that in this small, dirty room, which has just one bed, a small table, a gas stove, and a dead body. Now, this dead body belongs to a 29-year-old man whose name was Abel Barbe. And I bet most of you, if not all of you, have not heard of him. And this is an amazing mystery. So just listen to this. Abel Barbe's skin was blue, and there was dried blood on his lips. So that indicated that the gas stove was responsible for his death. And the investigation that followed said that his death was actually a suicide, and actually it was. He had gassed himself to death. Now, one of the reasons why he did it was because he was poor, he was depressed, he didn't have any friends, but it wasn't just because of this. When the autopsy report came and the doctors examined his body, they realized that there was an error which had been made 30 years ago. This error was a genetic mutation that had caused a single enzyme within Abel Barbe's body to fail around April 1838, 7 months before he was born. And we know this for a fact because when the future Abel Barbe was first held by his mother, when he was born, she did not hold a son, but she held a baby girl. Now, this is a mystery, right? A baby girl was born, but the man who died was a man. And I'll come back to this and I'll explain. But let me first take you quickly around the world to some ancient mysteries, starting with the Great Pyramid in Egypt, which we are told was built by a pharaoh called Khufu as a tomb for himself. This is a 50-story skyscraper. It's 457 feet in height. And amazing things about the Great Pyramid. So some of the things are like, this is the original entrance of the Great Pyramid, which you can see on the screen, which is, as you can see, is sealed. You cannot enter the Great Pyramid using this entrance. So for thousands of years, no one could enter the Great Pyramid until in about 820 AD, the Caliph, Abdullah al-Mamun, decided he wanted to go inside. And in order to do that, he created an entrance because he couldn't find the original entrance. So he created this entrance, which is what you use today. If you go as a tourist to Egypt and you want to enter the Great Pyramid, you enter through this entrance. And by accidents or by coincidence, he actually managed to make it the hole very close to the original entrance. As you can see, the original entrance is directly above his entrance, and therefore he was able to accidentally arrive at the passages within the Great Pyramid. And I'll show you what's really, really mysterious about these passages. So Abdullah al-Mamun created this tunnel. He went inside hoping to find treasure, gold, silver, precious stones. But when he reached inside, it was empty. Now we are told that Khufu had built this as a tomb, but Khufu was never buried there. There was no gold, no silver, no inscriptions on the walls of the Great Pyramid. It's absolutely bare. Instead, what we find inside the Great Pyramid is this very mysterious network of passages. You can see this passage going down here. There are 3 chambers, an underground chamber, the so-called Queen's Chamber, the King's Chamber, 5 so-called pressure chambers, and you can see this in a slightly better way, the various chambers. And I'm going to show some photographs. It's very interesting that all these passages are at angles of 26 and 27 degrees. None of them are, except for this one leading to the Queen's Chamber, none of them are horizontal, or at a decent angle. So let's start with the Grand Gallery. This one over here, this largish looking corridor or passage. This is what it looks like. Now today, for tourists, they've put these wooden steps and you've got handrails, so it's easy to climb. But in the olden days, this is a photograph taken from 1923. You can see how difficult it is to climb the Grand Gallery. Let's take a look at another chamber, the antechamber, which is just before the King's Chamber. Now, you can see over here, and I'm going to blow this up for you now. You can see over here that you come through the Grand Gallery, and then you have to crawl through this passage to get into the King's Chamber. And here it is. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen, this is the entrance to the King's Chamber. You cannot walk into the King's Chamber. You have to crawl through it. And then there are other passages like this very small little shaft in the wall of the Great Chamber, the King's Chamber, the Great Pyramid. There's one on the north wall, there's one on the south wall. What are all these mysterious passages doing? And look at this one again. Can you see this horizontal passage that is going to the Queen's chamber? This is also something that you need to crawl through. Here's the entrance to that passage, and you can see from the height of this man, John Edgar, that you have to crawl through this passage. So to get to any of the chambers in the Great Pyramid, you cannot walk through any of these corridors. You have to crawl through them. It's amazing. Here's another fact about the Great Pyramid, which I'm sure most of you didn't know. Look at this photograph very carefully. This is the Great Pyramid. And can you see that actually this side and each side of the pyramid actually has two sides to it? You can see there's a small angle over here, and very few people know about this. In fact, this photograph is from 1926, when for the first time a flight was made over the Great Pyramid, and they took this photograph and they realized that the Great Pyramid actually doesn't have four sides, it has 8 sides with this angle over here. Why? Why like this? And here you can see in this color photograph more recently, you can see this groove, which is the angle of the two sides. You can see one, you can see a very faint groove here as well. Very strange. What's the answer to these mysteries? We don't know, but I'm going to take you to the Sphinx, which is close by to the Great Pyramid. And this is supposed to have been built by Khufu and Khafre in approximately 2500 BC. And we are told that Khafre built this to look like him. This is the face of Khafre. And for most of the time since it was built, the Sphinx has been like this, bedded in sand up to its shoulders with just the neck and the head visible. Now, in 1990, a scientist was called to Egypt. Dr. Robert Schoch is a professor of geology at Boston University. He has a PhD in geology, and one of his specializations is the erosion of rocks. Dr. Robert Schoch was called to understand if the dating of the Sphinx to 2500 BC was that accurate or not. And what he discovered was interesting. You can see all these marks of weathering, of erosion on the body of the Sphinx and on the walls of the enclosure. All these marks, can you see these vertical marks? All these, Dr. Robert Schoch, based on scientific tests, said that all these were caused not by wind erosion or sand erosion, but by heavy rainfall. And that is a problem because in 2500 BC, it wasn't raining much in Egypt. In fact, the last time it rained really heavily in Egypt was between 8000 and 5000 BC. Robert Schoch was telling the world that the Sphinx is at least 9,000 years old. But then who built it 9,000 years ago? Let me now take you to Stonehenge, another mystery over here. These stones are all approximately 70 tons, 70 tons in the standing stones and the ones on top. And what's very interesting is that there are locks on these stones. You can see this projection and a corresponding socket. These lock together, and there's a lock on the side called a tongue and groove joint, which locks together, like a Lego set, and also the side tongue and groove joint locks together like a jigsaw puzzle. And it's a mystery how in 2400 BC, they were able to build such a complex monument. And so accurately, because Stonehenge is aligned to the solstices, to the equinoxes, and it's aligned to the sun, the moon, and the stars. And here you can see the photographs I took at Stonehenge. You can see the holes, the mortise holes very clearly. You can see the projections called tenons over here. And here, if you look very closely, you can see the outline of a tongue from the tongue and groove joint at the side. And I'm going to take you to a place called Baalbek. This is in Lebanon, and this is the wall of the Temple of Jupiter. Now, there's a controversy about it. Some archaeologists say that this was built 3,000 years ago. Some people say older than this. But what I want to show you is these 3 stones. If you can see these 3 stones, which are placed in a row on this wall, and to give you an idea of how big these stones are, these are 2 fully grown men. So stone 1, stone 2, stone 3. Here you can see them better. Why am I showing you these 3 stones? Because they are placed on top of this wall at a height of about 20 feet. And each of these 3 stones weighs 840 tons. That's right, 840 tons. Somebody lifted them up there thousands of years ago, lifted them 20 feet into the air and put them on the wall. Now, the problem is that today in the 21st century, to lift heavy weights like this, we use a crane that is like this. This is the largest crane in the world. And even this crane, the maximum capacity is only 825 tons. So today in the 21st century, we can't lift those blocks of stone. How did they lift them and put them on that wall thousands of years ago when they didn't have cranes? And who were these people who were building with these stones? Now, if you go to the quarry where the stones came from, you still have the stone in the quarry, which weighs 1,150 tons. And just next to it, about 4.5 years ago, you can see there's a stone in the ground which was discovered, which is 1,650 tons. Enormous blocks of stone. And somebody, thousands of years, was building using these blocks of stone, which we cannot lift today in the 21st century with all our technology. Another fascinating fact connected to these sites that I've just shown you. This is the Great Pyramid. And if you look at the diagonal of the Great Pyramid that points to the northeast, it points directly to Baalbek, which I just showed you. And if you look at the diagonal of the Great Pyramid that points northwest, it points directly to Stonehenge. What is the connection between these three different monuments? Why is this alignment over there? It can't be by accident. I mean, you wouldn't build such a huge monument like the Great Pyramid with 2.5 million blocks of stone in it and accidentally make it point to, the diagonals point to Stonehenge and Baalbek so accurately. Something was happening thousands of years ago. Here's another one in Wales, a burial chamber. Between October and April every year, the sun rises through the entrance passage, shines in and lights up this pillar. But what's really amazing is that the pillar is at the side of the entrance passage and it's not directly in line with the entrance passage. So the sun reflects off the walls of the chamber. And here's the other amazing thing. You can see these notches, these marks on the stone pillar. Every day, the sun shines in between October and April and lights up a different notch. It climbs. It climbs from the base to the top of the pillar from October to April. Now, many years ago, in the mid-90s actually, I came across two books among a lot of other books I read, and the authors of these two books tried to explain some of these mysterious monuments. There are hundreds of these monuments all over the world. I don't have time to show you all of them today. I mean, it would take a very long time to show you all of them. But basically, I can summarize the theory that these authors they put forward in the mid-1990s. This was about 95, 96. They basically said that all these monuments were built by an ancient global civilization that had advanced science and technology. And where is the civilization now? They said it was wiped out by a global flood 12,000 years ago. But the question that you should always ask when theories like this come is, where is the evidence? So I'm going to show you three things today, three scientific facts today. I'm not saying that the theory is right or wrong. I'm just going to present to you these interesting facts. The first fact is that we now know for sure, based on scientific evidence, that in about 10,500 BC, 12,000 years ago, the Earth was hit by a comet. Fragments of the comet, the comet broke up into fragments which raced through the atmosphere of the Earth and struck the Earth in different places. These are the places where the comet fragments struck the Earth. Now you must remember that there was a very thick ice cap in a lot of these places, and two things happened. The first is, because the comet fragments were hot, the ice cap melted, and temperature and the sea level rose by hundreds of feet, drowning out the coastlines. The map of the world, which you see today, was formed 12,000 years ago because there was a global flood. Today we have evidence that there was a flood in many of these parts of the world. The second thing that happened was, with the impact of the comet fragments, the Earth shook, literally shook, because there were so many of these huge fragments hitting the Earth. There were earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, debris was thrown up into the atmosphere, and the sun was blotted out for 1,300 years. There was an artificial winter, which is today called the impact winter, because it was caused by the comet impact. And where's the scientific evidence for the impact winter? Take a look at the red line on this graph. Now, this is a report based on the analysis of ice samples which were taken from the Greenland ice cap. And you know what geologists do? They drill into the ice cap, pull out ice samples in Antarctica and Greenland, and then they try and analyze the samples to see what was happening in the Earth's uh, atmosphere, what was the climate like on the Earth thousands of years ago. So look at this red line now. This is the temperature. Minus 45 degrees centigrade, this is the ice age. Minus 45 degrees centigrade, 15,000 years ago, the ice age starts ending. Global warming happens. Temperatures rise to about minus 30 degrees centigrade. And then something very mysterious happens. The temperatures drop suddenly from minus 30 to minus 50 degrees centigrade. Over the course of so many years, it becomes colder than the ice age was. This is not a natural phenomenon. Now we know that this is when the comet hit the Earth. And here you can see for 1,300 years, there was an artificial winter when temperatures stayed colder than the ice age. And this is today called the Younger Dryas period. And then when the dust in the atmosphere settled down and the sun came out again, global warming happened again and temperatures rose until they came back to where they are today. Now, this discovery of the comet impact solved a very big mystery which had been puzzling scientists for a very long time. And that was the sudden mysterious disappearance, the extinction of all these animals 12,000 years ago. All of them died out together, all except this little one over here, which is us, human beings, Homo sapiens. All these other animals died out together 12,000 years ago. And for many years, scientists couldn't understand why. Today, we know that these animals were tropical animals. They could not survive the 1,300-year-long impact winter, the artificial winter caused by the comet strike. The second discovery I want to share with you is a place in Turkey called Gobekli Tepe. This discovery was made in 1994, and I'm really surprised I don't see it in history textbooks because this is one of the most fascinating sites in the world. One of the basic things about this site is that everyone agrees on the date when the earliest level of Gobekli Tepe was built, which was approximately 12,000 years ago. In somewhere between 9,500 to 10,000 BC is when Gobekli Tepe was first built. And there's no dispute about this. Unlike the Sphinx, where Egyptologists say 2,500 BC, Robert Schoch and the scientists say, no, it has to be at least 7 to 8,000 BC. Gobekli Tepe, everyone agrees it was built approximately 10,000 BC. What is Gobekli Tepe? Hundreds upon hundreds of these stone circles. You can see these, and beautifully shaped stones. Stonehenge, if you remember, were these rectangular stones put in place. These stones have been cut, polished into T shapes, and there are carvings on them. And I'll show you these carvings in just a minute. You can see these hundreds upon hundreds of these. And the beauty of Gobekli Tepe is also, like Stonehenge, these stone circles are astronomically inclined to the Milky Way, to the constellation of Cygnus, to the constellation of Orion. You can track the stars using this. And remember, this is 12,000 years old when we were supposed to be hunter-gatherers, when we didn't have knowledge of astronomy or the scientific technology to build such accurate monuments. Here, if you look very closely at your screen to this pillar where my cursor is, I'm showing you one of the very strange animals which was carved. There are lots of animals and mysterious symbols carved on these pillars which no one has been able to interpret or decipher. But one thing we know for sure, until now we've been taught in our history books that human civilization started about 6,000 years ago with the city-states of Sumeria, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. With the discovery of Gobekli Tepe, we now know that human civilization had to have started much, much earlier, 12,000 years ago, when Gobekli Tepe was built, because Gobekli Tepe could not have been built by a bunch of cavemen. It was built by a sophisticated culture, a civilization that had scientific knowledge. But who were these people? We don't know. But here's the third scientific discovery, and this one is going to blow your mind. So these are archaeologists who were excavating a cave in Russia in 2009. The name of the cave is Denisova. And they discovered two things to start with. They discovered this tooth, and a pretty large tooth. It's about 2.5 times the size of our teeth. The second thing that they discovered was a finger bone. and it was a pretty large finger bone. We have multiple bones in our fingers, one of those. So they presumed that the tooth and the finger bone they discovered belonged to some large extinct animal, and they sent it off for genetic testing. And the DNA test results came back saying that both the tooth and the finger bone belonged to a human girl who lived about 40 to 50,000 years ago. The DNA was human. This girl belonged to a human species which we did not even know existed before 2009. Today, we call these people the Denisovans. And we don't know much about them. More and more remains are being found, but no complete skeleton has been found. So I'm going to deviate from fact here and speculate, because this is very interesting speculation, as you'll see. It is speculated that there's no evidence for this. It is speculated that because on the basis of the size of the bones, the jaw bones that have been found, the teeth that have been found, the finger bones, toe bones which have been found, it is speculated that these people, the Denisovans, were big people. They could have been anywhere between 9 to 11 feet in height, literally giants. But this is speculation. No complete skeleton has been found, so we don't really know how big they actually were, though we now know what they may have looked like, because scientists have managed to put together faces of Denisovans based on the skull structure, on the basis of the bones that have been discovered. But this is something about the Denisovans that really is amazing. This is a stone bracelet which was discovered along with the bones, the finger bone and the tooth of that girl. So presumably that girl may have worn this. I want to show you this little hole over here. It's looking large on the screen because it's magnified, and this is the hole magnified even more. But this is actually a very, very fine hole drilled into the stone bracelet. This hole has a diameter of only 1 millimeter. And just think, somebody drilled a hole of 1 millimeter into that stone 40 to 50,000 years ago. So scientists couldn't understand how they did it, because stone tools 40, 50,000 years ago were very primitive, and it was very difficult to do this. So they ran scientific tests, and now I'm going to quote from the scientific report, because if I just tell you it, you'll probably think I'm kidding, but this is serious stuff. Here is what the scientists say. They say that this hole could have only been made using a two-faced drill operating at very high speeds. This is exactly what they say in the report. And they also say that this technology should not have existed 40 to 50,000 years ago. It came much, much later, thousands of years later. So the Denisovans apparently knew what they were doing. So among other things, sorry, I'll just drink some water. Among other things that I was researching, remember, I write with the Mahabharata as a basis. So I wanted to explore, what was science like in ancient India? And I came across so many amazing discoveries. I'm just going to share one with you today because I don't have time. And this was an ancient textbook, a textbook on surgery written by Sushruta, who was India's first surgeon. And he talks about all kinds of surgery: brain surgery, eye surgery, plastic surgery, bone surgery, you name it. Different types of surgeries are there. But what's really amazing is that one of the techniques of plastic surgery, which Sushruta has written about in this book, which he practiced almost 3,000 years ago, because he lived somewhere between 600 BC and 1000 BC. So one of the techniques of plastic surgery which Sushruta practiced 3,000 years ago is still in use today in the 21st century. The exact same technique, where you take a flap of skin from the forehead and use it to reconstruct the nose and the lips. And we call, in the 21st century, we call this forehead flap rhinoplasty. And it's pretty well recognized across the world. So if you go, for example, to the website of Columbia University, they talk about the same technique of plastic surgery. It's fascinating. There were things happening in ancient times that we didn't really know about. We tend to think about our ancestors thousands of years ago as people who were primitive, but look at all the stuff that was happening thousands of years ago. And we don't have any records about who these people were, how they were being able to do it. So what does this have to do with a story that I started the session with? France February 1868, the story of Abel Barbe. So there was a scientific explanation to the mystery of Abel Barbe, who was born a girl and died a man. And this is what the science, so I'm not going to get into the details, the clinical and medical details. I'll just summarize it for you. Abel Barbe was what is medically called a male pseudo-hermaphrodite, which means that these are people who are born female and at a certain age, they spontaneously, naturally become male. It actually happens. It is something that has been very well documented in many parts of the world. Abel Barbe was just one very famous case, but there were lots of other documented cases of this happening. And as I'm talking, let me see if you can remember something in the Mahabharata along the same lines. Now, like I told you, this is caused by the lack of an enzyme, which is called 5-alpha reductase. And the lack of this enzyme results from a genetic mutation which causes the enzyme to fail. What does this have to do with the Mahabharata? So there is a story in the Mahabharata which sounds quite familiar. It's a story of a king called Drupad. A daughter was born to Drupad who was named Shikandin. And Drupad was a bit disappointed because he had been promised that he would have a son. Now, when Shikandin was born, he prayed to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva appeared to him. This is exactly the story in the Mahabharata. Lord Shiva appeared to him and promised him, gave him an assurance saying, don't worry, you have a daughter today, but the girl will become a boy at some point in time. And this is exactly what happens. When Shikandin grows up, she goes into a forest, she meets a yaksha called Stuna, and the yaksha agrees to swap genders. The yaksha says, you will become male and I will become female, but it's only temporary, right? Stuna agrees to lend Shikandin his gender. And it's a long story, but so I can't explain why. There's a reason for that. But Stuna basically says, I will let you borrow my masculine gender, and I will take your female gender for a short period of time. Of course, what happens then is that Kuber, the king of the Yakshas, he gets very angry with Stuna, and he curses Stuna, saying, you will stay female forever, and Shikandin will remain a male forever. You will never get your masculinity back. Shikandin will keep your masculinity and she will be a man forever. And that is how Shikandin became Shikandi. Now, can this story be explained by science? It's a story from the Mahabharata. It's a very fantastic story. And Shikandi had a very big role to play in the killing of Bhishma Pitama, which was the turning point of the Kurukshetra war. Do you notice the parallels between this and the story of Abel Barbe, a girl becoming a man? Could it be possible that this was actually something that really happened? A princess was born, and the royal family must have been, when she maybe she was a male pseudo hermaphrodite, and at some age she spontaneously naturally became a man. This would have been a scandal for the royal family. A princess suddenly becoming a prince. How are they going to explain it to society? So a story was created. And Lord Shiva was brought into it to give it a divine imprint, a divine justification, saying, Lord Shiva has promised that the girl would become a boy. Is it possible? That's all I'm asking. I'm not saying this is what happened, but it's intriguing how when you look at what was happening in those times, there's so much you can think of. And these are some of the things that I explore in my books. They're modern day thrillers, but they look at science, history, and mythology. And like I said, the other series, the Patala Prophecy series, is more fantasy, they're also thrillers set in modern times, but they are more around fantasy and look at the power of mantras and swords, and an amazing world which is hidden to us. So I'm going to stop here because I'm sure there are questions. But before I do that, I very quickly want to talk to you about the Quest Club, which is a club on my website, which I started for my readers who wanted me to share my research. Everything I've shared with you today is part of what I've come across in the course of my research. So at the Quest Club, I put up a lot of interesting posts. I explain some of the science and the history and the mythology that I talk about in my books. I interact with my readers. It's a very interactive site. We have 11,000 members in the Quest Club all over the world today. And the best thing is it is absolutely free to join. All you need to do is to go to my website or follow this URL, christophercdoyle.com/the-quest-club. Create your username, create your password, and like I said, it's absolutely free. And if you want to write to me, contact at christophercdoyle.com. You can write to me through my website. I'll be happy to respond to you. So I'm going to stop here now, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions. Then I can see there are already a lot of questions coming in. So let me get my camera back, and then I'll start answering your questions. Okay, great. So let's see. Your stories, question 1. Your stories weave engrossing mysteries based on ancient Indian texts. Please tell us a little about the research that goes into every book, and when you plan series of books, how does this all work? So I hope that I've given you a glimpse, a flavor of the kind of research that goes into my books, because this is exactly what I do. I do a lot of research. I typically read anywhere between 150 to 200 books for every book I write. So I've written 5 books. I've probably, the amount of research I've done is now more than 1,000 books. It's a lot of in-depth research. Each book takes about 2 years to research. The last book in the Mahabharata Quest series has taken 4 years to research. 2016 is when the last book, The Secret of the Druids, came out, and I've just finished the research. So it's a lot of intensive research because I like to get my facts right. I like to be very accurate. When I plan series of books, I don't really plan a lot in the sense that, for example, when I started writing the Patala Prophecy series, I knew where I wanted the story to go. I knew I wanted to write 5 books, but I didn't know what was going to go into each book. So I just start writing a book and then I write. So there's not a lot of planning. I'm a very chaotic writer that way. I don't plan a lot of things. I like to just write as it goes along. The story keeps developing. The Mahabharata Quest series was also very different. When I wrote the Mahabharata Secret, which was not part of the series, I did not even plan to write a series. But after the success of the Mahabharata Secret, I decided I would write the Mahabharata Quest series. And again, I did not have any number of books in mind. I didn't know whether it would be 3, 4, or 5 books. Today, I know that there are going to be 2 more books in the series, so it'll probably be a 4-book series. But typically, what I do is I look at an event from the Mahabharata. I look at a scientific explanation for it, do a lot of research into the science, because I don't write science fiction. My science is very, very real. I then formulate a theory, a hypothesis, and then I discuss it with experts. Usually they're international experts around the world, who then advise me on whether I'm accurate in the science or not, and then I tweak the theory according to that, and then create a story around it and bring in the history as well. So that's really how I do my writing. Okay, next question. I feel Egyptians had tamed dinosaur-sized animals to lift up to 200-ton stones. Is that possible? So there's no evidence, unfortunately, that there were dinosaur-sized animals in Egypt, at that point in time. And lifting 200 stones, but even then, how would a large animal get a stone, a 20-ton block of stone, or a 70-ton, because there are some stones in the Great Pyramid which are 70 tons in weight, and they are at a height of 100, 150 feet above the ground. Remember, the Great Pyramid is 457 feet in height. There is no animal in the world which is 457 feet in height. So how would they have got those 20-ton, 25-ton blocks of stones to a height of 400 feet using animals? Would have been a bit difficult, even if those animals had been around. Why does our history syllabus not include such mind-blowing stuff? How can we find more such things ourselves? Well, I don't have an answer about why. I asked this question myself. History would be so much more interesting, so much more fascinating if we had some of these, these things included, because these are all facts. The only speculation that I did over here was the height, whether the Denisovans actually were 9 or 11 feet in height. But everything else is very factual. So I'm surprised that a lot of this is not in the history books. How can you find most of these things yourselves? Well, a great place to start is the Quest Club. You can start getting ideas, based on some of the research that I share, and you can interact with me. I'd be happy to give you ideas on where you can research based on what your research interests are. Next question. For years now, we have been trying to resolve the mysteries of the pyramids. There will be a time when civilization after ours will wonder the same thing, probably when a biotic pandemic wipes us out, hope not. What ways do you suggest we should leave evidences to let them know how technologically advanced we are today? Well, you've hit upon a great point over here, and that is that there is actually no way, because nothing survives for thousands of years. Our best buildings would crumble into dust. What would be left would be stone skeletons. A lot of the stuff that we have, would just disappear. It would disintegrate over time. Probably what someone thousands of years would come across is a lot of plastic. And they'd say, oh, this civilization was, they survived on plastic, which is pretty true. But it's very, very difficult to find ways of storing information that are sustainable. And I don't think even with all our technology, we've been able to discover, something that works for long periods of time. Hopefully, it will happen sometime. Do you think your interest in music makes you a better writer? How do these distinct streams of talent help or hinder your creativity? No, I don't think there's a link. At least I don't feel there's a link. Music is one thing, and writing is another thing. You need a very different ambience for music. You need a very quiet ambience for writing. I like to be in a peaceful place when I'm writing, wherever it is. So I don't think there's actually any link creatively between the two, quite honestly. Your books are targeted for young readers. Do you invest any time in research into what would appeal to them in terms of words used, writing style, plots, etc.? Or does the meat of the story you're trying to tell take most of the focus? Now, this is an interesting thing. When my books were first released, they were never targeted at young readers, very honestly, because if you look at the Mahabharata Quest series, not one of the leading characters is less than 28 years of age. If I was writing for young readers, yes, the Patala Prophecy is more for young readers because two of the main characters are 15-year-old children. But in the in the Mahabharata Quest series, there are no children. Everyone's 28, 30, 40, and above. But I was pleasantly surprised to find that a lot of young readers have been reading my books. I was getting emails from them saying, I'm in school, I'm in class 8, I'm in class 9, or whatever. I've seen children from class 5 who have read the Mahabharata Secret, and they made a presentation for me with images of what they thought some of the locations looked like. So they're not consciously targeted at young readers, but I guess the theme of mystery and explanation using science that is accessible probably is what appeals. And of course, the sense of adventure. What I did try and do consciously, but that was not for age, it was more that anybody should be able to read my books. So I consciously keep the English very simple. It's not very easy, but I try and consciously make sure that you don't have to have a huge vocabulary or have be very fluent in English. Almost anybody can read the books. Next question. We often blame religion for social problems. The example of Shikandi compels us to think the royal family was compelled by social conservative norms to hide scientific anomaly under religion, acts of God. So isn't religion a victim of society? Well, it's a slightly difficult question to answer, especially in a short space of time. If we were having a long conversation about this, it would be much easier, but I've got to answer it in a couple of minutes, so I'll try. I think there's a connection between religion and society, and I think I don't know whether religion is a victim of society, but definitely it's something that gives a lot of things justification. Whether the justification is valid or it's not valid is a different, it's a different point and something one can always discuss. But to take the example of Shikhandi that I gave you, if that was indeed the case, the reason religion was brought in was to be able to justify a certain situation, and it kind of made it all okay. The fact that Lord Shiva had said that this is fine made it fine. So society tends to accept things much more willingly when it's based on something that they believe in. And I think this is not just something that applies to religion; it applies to belief systems per se. So irrespective of religion, if you have a particular belief system, if you're presented with facts that align to that belief system, you would, all of us would tend to believe things much more if they align to our belief system. And for things, even if facts are true, if they're not aligned to our belief system, we tend to reject them. And this is what's happening in many parts of the world where people are not wearing masks, for example. It's all about belief systems. Some of that is not even religion. When someone says, it's my natural fundamental right to be free, to have the freedom of choice not to wear a mask. Religion has not come into it at all. It's a belief system that freedom means that I can do what I want. So even though the facts, scientific facts are there, scientific advisors experts are saying that you should be wearing masks, people are saying, no, this conflicts with my belief system, which is about my freedom to make a choice. You can't compel me to do it. And therefore they're doing it. So religion is one part of it, but I think what's really fundamental is the belief system, and religion obviously is part of a belief system. So I don't know if I've been able to answer your question, but very quickly, that's what I think. Next question: is there any situation in your life that changed you and made you what you are today? Okay, this is an interesting question. Um, I don't know if I've changed radically in any way, but I really can't think of anything that would have changed me substantially. I think my life has just progressed from one experience to another, and those experiences would have changed me and shaped me in many ways. But I can't think of something fundamental or radical that would have had a big change or big impact, very honestly. Can we still find people who were born as a girl but after growing changes into boy? Yes. Uh, like I said, there are documented cases. Then there are lots of these cases all over the world, and they still happen even today. They happen. So it's there. Next question: how do you get the idea of writing a book and what to write in it? So the research that I do is so extensive that when you're researching for 2 or 3 years at a stretch, and you're reading and reading and reading, a lot of the ideas start coming from the research itself, because a lot of the mysteries I talk to you about today are based on the research I've done. When you're reading things, these questions jump out as, why isn't there an explanation for this? There's a question over here for which there's no answer. And as a fiction writer, I really try and provide answers to questions or try solutions to mysteries using fiction, where there's no answer. How was Stonehenge built? Why are there these curious questions in the Great Pyramid? I can create fictional answers for them but I try and base it on real science. So a lot of the ideas for writing a book come through the research, and that's why I like to spend so much time on the research. Writing the book doesn't take time. I write my books in anywhere between 3 to 5 months. That's all. The research takes years. And the reason why writing doesn't take so much time is because all the ideas are already there. Just a question of putting them together. Okay, last question. Celestial powers or gods actually existed in the Mahabharata and Ramayana times. So did they really, or are those metaphors of some kind? Okay, so it's a great question, and has a very complicated answer, because there is no evidence either way, very honestly. There's lots of speculation, lots of theories, but the who were these people, the Devas, for example? They were actually really demigods. They weren't really gods as such. They're treated more as demigods because they're shown as in the Mahabharata, in the Srimad Bhagavatam and other texts, the Devas like Indra and Varun and Agni, they're not immortal. So they're not gods technically, because God is someone who's immortal and does not die. But the Devas, the Gandharvas, they all die and they're reborn. They're part of the cycle of incarnation and reincarnation. So, so who were these people? We don't know. Could they have been like the Denisovans, people who really existed, and maybe they were superior to us in some ways, so we made them gods, or we put them in the same pedestal, with great powers. Uh, Difficult to say because there's no strong evidence either way. Okay, so we have one more question. So this is definitely the last one, I think. Have you traveled places to discover secrets of yourself? Well, here's the other thing. When I talk about research, it's not just reading and sitting in one place. I do a lot of location research. So in almost every single location in my books is personally researched. I go and travel there. So when I wrote The Secret of the Druids, for example, the action was set in the UK. I spent 5 weeks in Britain traveling. I saw 52 different ancient sites like Stonehenge. I spent 1 week with archaeologists studying Stonehenge, doing research there. And that's how I got to know about the building of Stonehenge. So I do a lot of location research. It's very, very critical. And my readers actually, if I tell them I'm not going to do location research, they come back and say they don't write the book. So they enjoy reading the details of the location. You can't. My belief is you can't really write authentically unless you've actually seen the place, you've smelt the place, you've felt the place. You have to have that experience. And so yes, I travel a lot, and I research every single place, almost every single place that I write about in my books. So that's I think that's the last question, and thank you all very much for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed what I shared with you, the secrets and the mysteries, as much as I enjoyed researching and reading about them myself. And for those of you who are interested in this and want more of this, please join the Quest Club. It's absolutely free, and I'd love to interact with you. We have online meetings at the Quest Club, more online meetings than our virtual meetings because I can't travel so much. But I'd love to see you at the Quest Club. So thank you. Over to Swati.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was wonderful. Yeah, so many mysteries unraveled. It was indeed a lovely time we had, and so well presented. We could almost, we were almost there actually while you were taking us through that tour. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks again.